Chairman, President, and CEO of IBM. Ginni began her career with IBM in 1981 as a systems engineer in Detroit. In 2012, she was named Chairman, President, and CEO, becoming only the 9th chief executive in IBM's 105-year history. Since that time, she has been transforming IBM into a cognitive solutions and cloud platform company that leverages the power of innovation, data, and expertise to improve business and society. She is boldly leading IBM and its clients into the era of cognitive business. Ginni has been named to Fortune's Most Powerful Women list for more than 10 years consecutively. She serves on the Council on Foreign Relations, the Board of Trustees at her alma mater, Northwestern University, and the Board of Overseers and Board of Managers of Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center. It is our privilege to have her here with us today. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Ginni Rometty.
Look, thank you and good morning. But Mike, before you, no, not my Mike, that Mike. Before you come off the stage, I think that was a wonderful and heartwarming welcome that he really thought very deeply about. So why don't we give him one more hand of applause? So it is my great pleasure to be with you this morning, and this is a topic that is very important to IBM, but it is very personal to me. You saw a little bit about my background and some of the boards I'm on, and hopefully you did not count years or anything in that thing there. They could have made that number a little smaller on that page, but this is to me, oh, you'll see, I hope by the time I'm done, how special it is, because when I became CEO 5 years ago, it was a really great moment. It was a moment that we got to introduce something called Watson, this idea of cognitive learning to the world, in a game show called Jeopardy. And at that time, I had said to the IBM folks, I said, look, this will be our next moonshot. I said, I would never be arrogant enough to believe we could change healthcare by ourselves, but we could change some small piece of it and be a part of that solution. And with a lot of friends and partners and all of you here, I felt this is the moment. And we'll do some things ourselves, maybe some grand challenges like oncology we'll contribute to. And then it was 2 years ago at this conference, while I wasn't here, we did get to announce something called Watson Health. And it's now, it's more than 7,000 people strong. And we announced it at the time with Medtronic, with Apple, with Johnson & Johnson. But this is now another special moment. You know, and on one hand, it's a very serious moment, as Dr. Mike talked about when he introduced, where there's much societal, political changes out there that'll have a great impact on healthcare one way or another. Government, regulatory, so whether it's ACA or mergers, acquisitions, and those are all really serious issues to be dealt with. But on the other hand, I also feel this is a profoundly hopeful moment in time for all of us. And that is something I want to talk about, because I think we're at a moment when we can actually transform many parts of healthcare. We can reinvent many pieces, and we can change things, like whether it's personalized medicine, epidemiology, wherever we go, it is a moment. And I think it's within our power, and as a group or a team, however you want to look at it, that we can change the world for the better. And this thing that's in front of us that I wake up, when you said, Dr. Mike, find the joy in what you do, and I think about this era, and it actually is an era that will play out in front of us, which is what we call the cognitive era. So I hope to persuade you at this early morning of three things. One, that this idea of cognitive healthcare, systems that learn, that this is real and it is mainstream, and it is here, and it can change almost everything about healthcare. The second thing, many of you are all, not many, almost everyone's an IT professional. I think you're going to make 3 key architecture decisions in the next year to 2 years. And I think they will impact the world, healthcare, for the next 2 decades. And I think healthcare will be the industry impacted more than any. And then the third is, like I said, this is an era. And the third thing I want to persuade you of is that cognitive as an era could usher in what people call a golden age. but it's if we shape it wisely. And I also believe healthcare could be the leader for the world in showing what it means for an industry to shape an era wisely. So, my first one, I'm going to try to run through them. My first is this idea that cognitive healthcare, artificial intelligence, is mainstream and it's real. Now, if I asked you, and this is a great big group to ask, so I am at no risk of being wrong. So how many people, if I said, how many of you are trying to digitize something? Raise your hand. I'm going to give you some exercise. Okay, almost everyone. It doesn't matter what industry I'm in. I can ask this, and I could ask this at home to my husband. I will win on this one. And so this idea that digital is a foundation for everything, but this idea that a competitive advantage is going to come from being cognitive, this idea of systems that learn, all of this massive data. Now, there is a land rush around artificial intelligence right now. And the kind I'm talking about for what we do is not consumer-oriented. I don't mean speech to text on the front of a search engine. I mean something that really augments the intelligence of everyone in healthcare. And so real application in healthcare, financial services, retail, and the like. So I thought I'd start with 5 lessons that we have learned. We've now been at this years. So 5 lessons we've learned in applying AI cognitive to healthcare. It's thousands of clients, lots of partners, and 5 things. One is those who are successful, they end up applying a range of cognitive services. That it is not enough to just think of artificial intelligence or natural language. You need vision, you need deep learning, you need many more algorithms. Second, and I think we're going to come back to this a lot with healthcare, you have to provide transparency. Who trained it? What data was used? How do you have confidence in the insights? Because this is an industry full of professionals. The third thing we've learned, it's got to be therefore domain specific. So trained in healthcare by healthcare physicians. And then fourth, it will be cloud-based to make it ubiquitous, but a cloud that is built for big data, built for security, and one, by the way, that's going to have to be hybrid, because otherwise you can't connect. This is such a wide ecosystem. Whether it's an academic center to a community hospital, you've got to be able to connect people. And the fifth learning is it's got to be an open platform, because this is an industry all about innovation. And an innovation that doesn't come from one person, and that's like I said when we started, it's about an ecosystem of people. Now, you would not be surprised if I told you that this is what we based all of IBM Watson on the IBM cloud. And it's why it's emerged as the AI platform for business. And in fact, those of you that met Watson years ago, I would tell you, today, 45 countries, 20 different industries, 9 languages, and we're on a path to touch a billion consumers by the end of this year, through many of you. And so what I thought in this being persuasive that it's mainstream, let me just use us as an illustration. And there's others with solutions, but us as an illustration of what does a world in healthcare look like with Watson, with cognitive. So there's a few dimensions of healthcare that I think are right to change. So one of them is you'll be able to go and discover actually new medicines and new solutions. So one of the most recent examples, Barrow Neurological, they're in Arizona. With Watson, they ranked ordered 1,500 genes and in the end discovered 5 that had never before been connected to ALS. Now, but what was important, all of the evidence-based prediction was all illuminated as to why. That's what matters. But new medicines. You will do what Dr. Mike talked about, personalized care. Oncology, one of the ones close to my own heart. In 2012, I think there were 14 million new cancer cases. We're on a path for that to soon be on the range of 22 million new a year. And I was just in India it wasn't just last week, it was like 3 days ago. They all run together. And 70% of the new cases, they're all in these developing countries. And when I happen to be there, it's one oncologist for 1,600 patients. I mean, this is around the world. I mean, we're blessed with the number we see in countries like this. And so we're rolling out now, it's a world of personalized care everywhere. So Watson for Oncology is rolling out across hospitals in China, across India, across Thailand, across Finland, and some wonderful examples. So while I was in India, Manipal Hospitals, one of the big private hospital chains, rolling out, they see 200,000 patients a year, published now multiple studies. In something, again, Dr. Mike, you said, one simple thing, allowing a doctor with the help of Watson, what took him 20 minutes to gather, 20 seconds now. Big difference. And so the time, because that's what they want, to spend the time doctoring in what they do. But here, Juniper Medical System, which is a community hospital, is going to be rolling out as well. So a world, when I say personalized care, already we see tens of thousands of cancer patients being served. But it will also be a world of precision medicine. Now, I think all of us think of precision medicine, we think about genomics. Genomics, your environment, your Fitbit. In fact, the other day I had my Fitbit and a watch. Does anyone else wear two? There are a few of you? Okay. I had never been before asked that question, by the way. I had two of them on I had the watch on, and the person said, I've never seen that before. Why would anyone ever do that? I sort of looked at it and I thought, yeah, why would I do that? And no, and I said that watch was a gift from my husband. That's my answer, and I'm sticking to it. So that was it. But this idea that an innovative approach, when I say precision medicine, I do think genomics, and I think all of this about our environment and how we live. So I hope you caught an example. University of North Carolina, the Lineberger Cancer Center, 60 Minutes did a segment not very long ago. The doctors there, 1,000 cases, and this to me is the great promise of the era we're walking in. 1,000 cases, and these were not standard cases. In almost 100% of the cases, doctor and Watson matched. But in 30%, Watson found more clinically actionable items. I mean, that to me is what this is all about. And so we're scaling genomics now. So Watson for genomics is with Quest Diagnostics, so we will reach and could reach genomic sequencing, advanced stage cancer for almost any patient in the United States. In Illumina, who many of you know is one of the greatest sequence producers, is now embedding Watson for genomics. And then today, Atrius Health, we are going ahead and announcing, and they're very well known, I think, to all of you for value-based care, really puts Watson in the front end, and they're going to be putting cognition right into the EMR that's there. So precision medicine to me is like just now going to come alive. Then the idea of people getting to manage chronic disease, another part of the world that changes. I think the work Medtronic has done, Sugar IQ, the ability to predict hypoglycemic event 3 hours in advance, 90% accuracy, never before done. Not enough. You look and then say the ability that care managers, really vulnerable populations where a lot of help is needed. I was looking at some statistics over the weekend. We now serve in 50 different health and human services departments, service areas around the world, agencies across 18 countries. And that to me is this ability that you are going to be able to take and analyze these cases. In fact, we're analyzing today 44% of all Medicaid cases. So that idea to help in all those dimensions, to me, is a different world. That is a different world. It's at the beginning, and it is already starting to happen. And that's what I mean. It's mainstream, and it's here. Okay, so now, but all of us, our professionals, are at the intersection of health and IT in some way. So 3 decisions I want to just at least plant with you that you're going to have a great influence on, and I think it will make the difference on whether this scales, it's secure, it's reliable into the future. You're going to make a decision on 3 platforms. You're going to pick a cloud, you're going to pick a data platform, and you're going to pick an AI platform. Now, let's talk a little bit about what you'd look for in each one of them, and maybe in the Q&A, Steve and I will talk a little bit about what's the downside if you don't. So first is on the cloud. You're going to have a cloud that's optimized for all this cognitive data. So data and cognition. Hybrid because it's a reality, and security because it must be. And I must say, I mean, this is, if I'll put one more plug in here, this is why when we did the IBM Watson Health Cloud, GXP, HIPAA compliant, and the only one out there with a quality management system. So healthcare ready. So you're going to pick one. In fact, actually, we recently announced with the FDA, it's not just the cloud. Again, I hope in Q&A we're going to talk a little bit about what can blockchain layer on here and do. But with the FDA, we're working on blockchain and oncology together. But you'll pick a cloud platform with those attributes. Then a data architecture. And I think it's been a long time since we've talked really robustly about changing a data architecture. But it matters now because you're going to have to pull together so much different data, a full spectrum, unstructured, structured, to do that world I just described. And in medicine, 90% of the data is image. And images, heretofore have been difficult to really garner out of it, but we can. So not only do you want to have any kind of data, you want to have control, and I have to say, you've got to be sure you have control of the insights that come out of that data. 80% of the data in the world is not searchable on the web. Think about that. That is where the greatest insights are, and it's yours. And so this idea that you have a data platform that allows you to combine data from all places, put it together, but the insights are yours, is going to be an important question to ask. And again, when we built the platform, on the Watson Health platform, 300 million medical records, 30 billion images, 40 million PubMed articles, every patent, but all with secondary use rights for you to combine data, and then the insights go to you. So you're going to make a decision on a data architecture platform. And then last is a decision on that AI in the cognitive platform. And I would tell you to look for a platform that has a range of services, because just like I said, you are going to need a range. I saw a great description of the difference between machine learning, artificial intelligence, and cognitive. And if you had a picture of a brain, you'd start machine learning as the basic, artificial intelligence to the front of your lobe, cognitive. And those are all different kind of algorithms and services that you use. So you're going to want a platform with many kinds. You won't be surprised you'd hear me say you want one that you can have transparency into how is it trained. You know, when we did oncology, this has been now trained by the best oncologists in the world. Memorial Sloan Kettering, Cleveland Clinic, the Mayo Clinic, and they've ingested all of the medical literature of the world on this topic. And then you're going to want to have that transparency. I have never, and again, we'll talk a little bit, I think, in the Q&A on this, that this is an industry, as in fact, actually many of the ones in B2B, they're full of professionals. This is not a black box. They want to understand why and how did that answer come up. And you want your doctor to understand that. You want to understand that. So these are the things I'd look for in this kind of platform. So you're going to make a decision on cloud, on data, and AI. And part of why those platforms will matter, like I said, you are an industry of ecosystems. And we had the pleasure today to announce a couple different new ecosystems. One is the Central New York Care Collaboration. And think of this as the first population health management platform that pulls together almost 1,500 plus providers with all of what would be the Medicaid patients in that area. But it's integrating data from whether it's primary setting, acute, community, all together, and giving a holistic view. Again, back to this platform thought and what you could do with it. So that's a world, as I described, I think one that is really just on the cusp of changing, one that you're going to have tremendous influence on these decisions you're going to make. And as I said, my last point, though, is it could be a golden era. It really could be a golden era. And you know, with every new era, at least in my experience, they come with amazing, aspiring dreams, but they also come with questions. And it was one of the reasons there's the Davos Economic Forum. I returned back there this year. IBM hadn't gone in decades. I returned back because this was the year there was much discussion about AI. And was it good or bad for the world? What would be its impact? What would be its impact on jobs? And I feel very confident in a way to answer those kinds of questions, because I think all of us that have such an impact on this, we have to take it seriously. And that when a new era comes, and they don't happen often, it's our responsibility to both guide that technology into the world in an ethical and in a really enduring way. So IBM, I prefer to call 105 years young, not old, but young. I feel like we've always in our time, and we have been blessed to work with many of you, but we've been blessed to work on what have been some of the world's toughest problems. And it's ranged from the excimer laser technology that we worked on for laser surgery, to the DNA resistor, or to systems like the United States Social Security system, to the reason I called it, for us, a moonshot, is we really did work on landing the man on the moon. So I thought I'd have a little fun. I want to show you a clip about this. How many people might have seen a new movie called Hidden Figures? Okay, and for an IT, it's a tech, if you haven't, well, I'm not like a producer or something of it, so I'm not advocating it for personal reasons, but it is about the dawn of the NASA space program. So let me just first just show you a clip, and I'll tie this back together. It's a clip from the film Out Now.
What's your name again?
Dorothy Vaughn. We need the IBM for Glenn's launch.
We got a job to do. Whatever happens up there, it's in God's hands.
My guys are ready. They can do the work. Ladies, we've been reassigned.
We're gonna call it
She basically saved her whole team's jobs and created a value for herself.
It's so funny what we think of as computers now and what they were then.
It's saying victory is with me.
You could hear it, right? From where I stand, you couldn't hear it. So that was, okay, so it is a great movie. Now look, I'm a little biased on it, right? So we didn't have to pay for that advertising, but it's one of those things. But what we have done is participated in every manned space effort that's been out there. And so I feel when I say we believe in moonshots, I really believe in it. And this idea that, yes, you have to have technology, but you have to have values. And so I go back to when I said about returning to Davos. And part of why I went, we introduced last month something that I hadn't done for a decade in IBM. And it was a letter to the whole community about something. And it was called the IBM Principles for Transparency and Trust in the Cognitive Era. And I want to end on this thought about it being a golden era if we usher it in, if we birth it right. Because I think these are principles that I'd love to see you embrace and adopt as well. And I'm going to be sure all of IBM does. And there's 3 of them. And it's in everything we build and what we do and what we bring to the world around this technology. The first one is its purpose. To make no mistake that what we are doing is building technology to augment human intelligence, not to replace it. We are here to augment what man does. This is not man versus machine. This is man and machine. And they're a doctor, this is his aide, this is his colleague to help him do what he struggles, or a nurse, or a practitioner, or it doesn't matter, a radiologist, an IT person, in security, it doesn't matter. It is here to actually support them and augment their intelligence. It is not about fear here, and everything we build is built that way. The second one is a principle around transparency. We will be clear with you and with our clients when they are being touched by AI, how it was trained and who trained it. And the business model. Don't believe in a world where all of the insight and all the intellectual property ends up with one person. This is a world where we'll bring insight, you bring insight. In the training though, those algorithms, they go to you. It's a world of transparency. But then there's the third, and again, Dr. Mike alluded a little bit to this. With every new era, that I can remember and back in time, with the new era is going to come new jobs. Some jobs will change, jobs will be new, and therefore it's going to be incumbent on all of us to train for those eras, train for those skills. And in fact, we coined a word called new collar. It's not blue collar, it's not white collar, it's a future job that's going to bring data, technology to almost anything that you do there. And so we can all start to do our job by preparing our kids coming out of school, our retraining, all around what this world does. So 3 tenets around purpose, transparency, and skills. So I conclude where I began. I couldn't be more excited to be here. It's probably a historic moment that I will always remember. And it is a world of forces in our control, some, but some outside of our control. But I would just, if I could make one recommendation, don't be tentative. This is a time to play offense, because you could build this world. And I think a world that I'm talking about, this cognitive world, it'll be a healthier world, it will be more secure, it will in the end be less wasteful, it will be more productive, more personalized, and in the end, it's a fairer, more diverse, and I believe more just world. And I think that's the world we all want to live in. So I thank you for letting me keynote this morning, and I wish you a great conference. So, now, my cheering section. You guys, that's, all my relatives are seated right there, okay? Now, So I get to be joined here by Steve Lieber, who, while this is HIMSS 17, I think I have this right, this is Steve's 17th year too. Did you guys know that? Anybody been here 17 years? My same cheering section, okay. So, Steve, where are you? Am I gonna ask myself questions?
I'm here.
Here you are. Good to see you up here.
Good to see you.
All right.
Thank you so much. Let's have a seat. And first, let me start off adding to Mike Zarukian's comments a great big welcome to all of you here in Orlando. It's so great to see you again, and I really appreciate you being with us today. You kept me busy backstage taking notes of all the things we wanted to talk about in Q&A. So let's see what we can do in terms of covering some of those topics, because you really have. You've introduced a number of really thought-provoking subjects there. But let me start out with just IBM in general. Especially, and I didn't see the hands of how many people have been here 17 or more years, but I know there are a bunch of them. The landscape's littered with companies that said, I can solve healthcare, and they're not here anymore. So why healthcare for IBM?
Yeah, this was a big decision, even for me, back in the moment when we decided not only to make it a moonshot, but to say, look, we really want to invest. We've invested heavily in this area, billions and billions of dollars now, because I am old enough to remember many times that I've worked on it throughout the years, and it was never the right moment. And there's no bigger grand challenge that is important to this world. And I think that's why this conference has 42,000 people in it. But B, there is a confluence of things that could make it be the right time. So where the technology is at right now, I think is so much, because health is not a system per se. It's not a formal system, and that's always been the challenge with it. And with many of these new companies, or companies over the years that have sprouted up, many of them have never been really products, they're features. So you have all these little islands everywhere. But now, I think the biggest contribution can be made through all of this data. And it is now at a time when we can pull it together. It can be done cost effectively. There's a mechanism called the cloud. Artificial intelligence is out of its winter. And you can pull all this together. And it's a moment when the whole system focused now more on value and a type of technology that can actually free a practitioner to do what he wants to do or she wants to do. So when I pull together the confluence of the size of the problem, the type of technology, its cost point and where it's at, and this ability to now do things you couldn't do before. Because I think a really important part, what we're doing here, we're not replacing necessarily, this is not about replacing healthcare professionals. This is about making them do what they love to do and allowing them to do it in a way. So this has really been one of the important learnings we've had over the years. I've watched it. Because many people's first reaction was, well, I don't want to, it's going to be a replacement, I'm threatened. But what I've watched in hundreds and hundreds of doctors, it's both a very collegial relationship. And Toby Cosgrove from the Cleveland Clinic, when he and I have talked about this a lot, he says, we're now on a path that data is going to double in healthcare in 75 days. It's impossible. And everyone in this profession wants to do their very best. So this idea that you can augment, and I watched that happen, in the technology at that point, I think that will be what unlocks this ability to augment and allow people to do what they do better will make the difference in time.
I saw that a couple of years ago, and the years do kind of run together quickly, and so it may have been more than that. But early days in terms of the first rollout of Watson, and you had oncologists from Memorial Sloan Kettering and Anderson and Cleveland Clinic, Mayo. I was struck by their engagement in what was being developed. And as I say, this was early days. It was not a commercial product. And I thought about it then in terms of exactly what you just said about, I'm surprised they're not feeling threatened. And so I'm just kind of curious of how did you get the clinician buy-in? How did you get to the point where...
We've had many, many learnings. So there's no straight road, right? And all trees don't grow straight to heaven. And so... we've had many, many learnings along the way, but because it was built for them, with them, and this idea, what I learned, you know it already, because you face it every day, but what I saw so clearly was the point about workflow, in that you have to be in a workflow at the right opportune moments for this technologies to be adopted. If this is something that goes and rides side saddle, that just doesn't work. That won't do it. And by the way, it's something I learned not just with doctors. I watched it in every profession we worked on, because we work on underwriters, financiers, cybersecurity professionals, sales professionals. Everyone's a professional. You've got to be in workflow. Everyone's like, hey, I don't have time to change my workflow here, right, to get adoption. And I'm very empathetic to that. So that's a lot of our learnings, in where I see greatest adoption is where people understand how to fit that in. And it's, by the way, it's why we had to go build out big design centers and all sorts of things to get that going. So that was one big way of how to get adoption. But I will tell you another. I was with a group of physicians, cancer specialists, and we were talking about this, and I said, well, but what's going to make you, why are you doing this? Why are you guys getting all your time? I mean, some of these, they've been training for tens of thousands of hours. I said, why are you doing this? And one of them said something really astute. She said, because the next generation of patients will demand this. And I think that is another equally motivating reason.
Well, there's no question about it. I think we all, especially those of us in this space and are as close to it as we are, we recognize potential, we recognize where this is going in terms of personalized medicine. The challenge is being able to, and I think you touched on it with your 3 platforms.
To hit a tipping point here.
You need these pieces and all to bring it together and start to address other things. And so talk a little bit more about the 3 platforms. And you said there may be a downside or an alternative approach or view.
I think the 3 and why, because to get this to scale, and many of you I'm sure have got both things you're doing, an experiment or trying or rollout. And, but I do now, when people say, why do you believe so hard? I say, because I have the data. I mean, now I see the results. This is out there with tens of thousands, hit 1 billion people at the end. So it's moving. So it is reaching those tipping points by what's happening. But the inhibitors are those platforms. Because I was mentioning to Steve, I was out last week with a group, and they were talking about the challenge. He said, in the business, they'd had all these people trying lots of different artificial intelligence. He goes, now I got a problem. I got all these little islands everywhere. I can do nothing with this stuff. I can't even match the learnings up with each other. And it was very reminiscent to me of the distributed computing days, when everyone did sort of a little bit of thing, and then we sort of had to pull all that back together. So I think you can get ahead of it now, and that's what I meant. You can get ahead of it now by thoughtfully. On one hand, you want lots of experimentation, and then there will become a day, though, that you want to put platforms in for that experimentation to happen. And so you'll pick 1 or 2 of these kinds of platforms to get that moving. And I think it may be, for a group like this, one of the most important things, they start to think about it, if you all, as a platform, not just an individual point solution, because that's where the power is going to come, especially because it's an ecosystem to pull together.
Yeah. In your remarks, you just mentioned the word blockchain. You really didn't go deep.
Because I could go like an hour on that.
And so it's sort of part of next phase. It's the things we need to start thinking about and understanding. Talk to us a little bit.
How many people are looking at, think blockchain has an application to this industry? Okay, the front of the room. And how many of you have businesses in that too? No, I'm just kidding. And so, that'd be me too. So an approach, and most people heard of blockchain first with Bitcoin. And that was the thing that kind of put it sideways to many people. But what I mean when I say blockchain, it's the technology that was actually underneath, the basic technology that could be underneath a Bitcoin. And all it simply says is you could safely, securely, trusted exchange anything. And if you think of it that way, man, it applies to so many things. And whether it's clinical trials or regulatory compliance, because we're doing a lot of work in compliance and financial services, and you're just right behind, in this. And so the idea that you could exchange, so why I'm so optimistic about it, I've myself, in our own company, we've now got in production many blockchain production applications. I have a whole financing business. We put the whole ledger up on blockchain, and now we're doing all our dispute resolution. I have a services business. All the parts are flying around. I mean, you have medicine. You have parts flying all the way through the supply chains of healthcare. And we're both sides. It is unbelievable the productivity that you can get and the authenticity and transparency into the data. Food safety with Walmart. We're doing the food safety they had issues in China, so this is pork and food safety. So from, I was going to say from farm, well, whatever, from the pig thing to wherever the plate goes, the whole way across. And so this idea of what you can do with it, now there's a couple things about it though, and those of you exploring, I would recommend highly, this is the Linux Foundation has something called the the Hyperledger Project. This is the fastest growing open source project in history. We're one of the contributors, but there's hundreds of companies contributing into the code. I have 50 full-time folks contributing. This is the fabric. And why this would be the fabric that's free, it's open source, and then everybody's going to build applications on top of it. But if you don't have one standard, blockchain will never take off. And that's why the internet took off. There was a standards group, not owned by one company, an open standards group, WWW, ITEF, there were these groups that set the standards for the world. That's what these groups can be for blockchain, and the ability to then securely transfer even health records, for you to determine your health record, who should have a view of it, longitudinal, 360. I mean, the opportunities to me for productivity are endless. We did a study. It's the quote of productivity alone, forget about the value, was in hundreds of billions of what could come with blockchain. So anybody who's not yet looking at where to apply it, there's very basic things to start with. Simple stuff is a supply chain for maintenance or a supply chain of anything. It would be a simple way to start, but I think it's going to have profound impact on healthcare.
When you think about healthcare data, though, and the cognitive technologies that you're so deeply involved in, it's very dependent upon the sharing of information,
Yep.
sharing of data. And we still struggle. I mean, if we're really honest about it, maybe not in front of 6,000 people, but when we're talking one-on-one, there's a hesitancy, there's a reticence in some places to be that open in sharing it. And I think about some of the cognitive work that you and other companies are doing, so dependent.
So why do you think the big reason is for that?
Well, I think, one, we still have some issues of proprietary interests. I mean, healthcare is a big business. I mean, let's be honest. I mean, we're in the business of caring for patients and that sort, but it's also a big business. There's a lot of money here. And a perception is data is the asset. That's the intellectual property. And I'm not really, am I feeding my competitor by sharing that? And so breaking through that, and as I say, I know that especially among, and I would expect in the early days of Watson, you found such a collaborative spirit among the oncologists and a willingness to go in and do this. But do you sense that that is possible today in other places? What are you running into as you're looking beyond oncology? Are you still having that same spirit of cooperation and collaboration?
I think this is an incredibly important topic, and I alluded to it in my talk, because I think I was the one that coined this phrase that data was the world's next natural resource. You can have lots of it, but there's no value unless you refine it, right? There's lots of countries that have lots of oil, but they're very poor countries where the oil actually sits. And so there's two sides of this data point. So one is, as an example, when I was using our own examples of the Watson Health Cloud, that we went and looked for data that had secondary use rights. It wasn't necessary just to live on its own. So 300 million patients worth, as well as the 30 billion images for training of Watson. But then any individual company could come and bring their data with it, combine it, but the insights from that combination belong to you. And so there is a recognition. There are pieces that will be shared, but I think there absolutely will be things you do not share. And I understand many of you are in absolutely for-profit organizations. And by the way, it isn't just that you should hoard the data, it is your accumulated assets that have value like any other kind of asset in a company has. And so I don't even consider it legacy. I assume it is your accumulated assets of your worth. And so that idea, and this is why I think it's important when you pick a platform. We worked really hard. This is one case where it was good. We were not born a search engine. And there are big search engines, they are knowledge graphs. And a knowledge graph is one big pool of data with lines, simply put, it's more than that, but connecting all of the data together. So when you bring your data, you're training a big pool and then everybody benefits. We really worked hard on Watson to have an architecture where there'd be some data shared, others that's not, and the insights could stay with the person who brought it. And so that's why I think you're going to live, and that's another reason I'm quite hopeful, a world where that'll break that barrier, because there are some parts you want to share, and then even then you'll build things with that you'll monetize as well when you do share them. So I think you're going to see all different business models come out of this. Look, you see them in other industries already starting to happen, and there are things people will share, like in cybersecurity. We just last week, general availability, Watson for cybersecurity, because all of you have cyber people in your companies. I mean, my goodness, they see 200,000 alerts a day. What on earth? You know, how good, the challenge they have is so hard. And so in this case, people will share all of their threat data anonymously, right, and pool it together and then use it.
Yeah. We were talking beforehand, and Ginni asked me, she said, okay, what is it that this group is here for this week in terms of the things that are really pressing on their minds? And I said, well, I'll probably have a better answer on Thursday after I spend some time talking with you. But I came up with three things. One is changing political landscape and administration. None of us know what's going to be happening there, so we're all here trying to pick each other's brains to figure that out. Analytics, cognitive technology, everybody is talking and focused on that. I was in Istanbul about 3-4 weeks ago working with my colleagues in Turkey for our program there in May, and they're asking me, what can you do, Steve, in terms of bringing some thought to Turkey about analytics? We're really focused on moving from where we are into that. So it's clearly everywhere a major topic of conversation. The third is the one you just mentioned, security. Everybody is deathly afraid that they're next.
Yeah, well, this is one of those topics, right? It's, you know, I have always, as we've been transforming IBM and as we were building out all our new portfolios, and we went and invested in analytics, cloud, mobility, and I always said underpinned by security. I mean, from the very beginning, underpinned by security when no one was, because I said all this is great, but if this has not got security under it, we're going to take big steps backwards, right? On all of the sharing of data, the mobility, everything about it. And so I have a strong, I was telling Steve, I have a strong viewpoint about security, in that I hope it resonates, because actually my analogy is it's healthcare is the analogy on it. I said security is a big data and analytics problem. That the average company, believe it or not, has 145 security products across 40 vendors. And I said it would be like putting a different alarm system on every door and window of your house and thinking that you would be safer, which of course, you know you wouldn't, right? So you wouldn't. Or this idea that it's just a moat, that you could assume if you put a deep enough moat around your company that nobody bad gets in. So I said the reason it's a big data analytics problem, and I think that's the paradigm to use in solving it for all of you, is that you've got to assume the bad guy's in already. You have to assume there is something, and as you know, a great number, by the way, are either accidental or inside as well. So it isn't just external things that go bad. And so this idea in healthcare, if you think of your immune system in your body, we all have germs in our body, lots of them. And the idea with an immune system is if they flare up, the immune system kind of boxes it off so it doesn't infect the rest of your body. That's what you would do with security. And it's how we run it in the company, and that's the portfolio we built, which is it's constant monitoring of everything and making those connections you can never see. And it's, I always say, the little footprints in the sand of what's coming. And therefore, you have to have, at the heart of your security system in your company, I think it is an analytics engine at the heart of it. I mean, forgive me, we have of course built that, but that is the idea, and at the heart of it is analytics. You're constantly, and there are others, you're constantly monitoring this, and then this is why I think health is such a great idea or analogy. You guys built out things like the CDC, the Center for Disease Control, the WHO, the World Health Organization. Why did those happen? Those were all formed because if a disease broke out in one country, not to get to another country. And to me, that's why information sharing and the right kind of governance and regulatory regimes around this are so important, that you're now starting to see. And under President Obama, there was a passage of a law to have cyber, the sharing, right? Because most people don't want to share, because if they share, they have a threat of a lawsuit and all. So you have to share, and that's what those organizations did, right? Without impunity, you could share to get that to happen. So I think it is that you're the number one industry, healthcare is the number one industry targeted. The average cost of a breach in healthcare or of a medical record is about $220, which maybe doesn't sound like a lot till you multiply it by millions of what you might have in each individual breach. And so there is a lot of reasons to approach it that way, but I am as well optimistic because I see the impact of using these engines. I saw a client last week, great security staff, and they had gone through all those alerts and said, nope, the company's not infected. We threw Watson cybersecurity, 30 seconds. Yep, it was about through 2/3 of the company. So you just can't, and it's not, they're great. You can't see it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't catch because I couldn't hear you backstage, what your reference to Hidden Figures was, but I'm just going to...
Okay. He mustn't have heard anything I said, is what I think. Okay, so...
I wanted to go down a particular path, but I didn't know how much you had already said down this path.
Okay. So Hidden Figures, I've always said, when we started our work in healthcare and made this really formal announcement and that we'd worked up to for quite some time, it was our moonshot. So inside to my IBMers, I've always said this is our moonshot. And the reason was IBM's time working, one of the great, and we've had a chance to work on many great things in the world, but one of them was landing the man on the moon, all the manned space missions. If you look in our archives, the photos of that point in time, the space control, they're all IBM shirts hanging every other 2-3 with other companies, but hanging on the jackets there, played a huge role. And it's this idea that you, even if it's hard, take a grand challenge and you do your part in the world to make an impact on it. And so the Hidden Figures, if you haven't seen the movie yet, you got to go see it. It is about that time and space and the role that, we're in it as a backdrop, actually. A friend of mine was producing. He says, hey, this movie's got you all over it. Do you want to take a look at this? And so I said, well, is it accurate? So and it's accurate. And so it's a wonderful time. And it was just that analogy that when you do things, I think it comes in on all of us, and you're an industry that's at its heart. When you do things that are so important, you have an obligation and a responsibility to guide them into the world safely. And I feel that way about AI into healthcare, that we have an obligation to do it safely.
Well, I'm going to go a different direction with the movie, because there's certainly another theme going on there, and that's women succeeding in a male-dominated world. And certainly you go back to the early days of NASA in the 60s. I mean, it was all about testosterone. And so in your career, and I would bet, going back to the early days, and maybe still, you have challenges and struggles in the corporate world. So talk to us a little bit about your experience, what you had to deal with, how you overcame it, how you got to where you are.
Yeah. Well, for me, I guess we all learn so much from how we're brought up. And I've told this story at times. I mean, I was raised by a single mom. And we had sort of a pretty normal, very normal life until I was my early teens, but my siblings were all quite younger than I. And just one day, my mother found us all alone with no money, no house, nothing. And I always say my brothers and sisters and I all really watched and learned just by watching her, nothing she ever said. She didn't have a college degree, but no money, she had to do something. And so, for a while we had to go on food stamps and all these other things, and she went back to school, and by the way, she ended up working in her whole career at Rush Presbyterian Hospital in Chicago. And but what I watched at that time, and I think what it taught us is, A, you never let someone else define who you are, and B, you always find a way to take care of yourself. And as I tell young people all the time, and I mean, in the end it turned out great. My siblings I always say, I am the least successful of the four of them. The other three have done superb. And my mom always says, God, what did I ever do? And she did everything. And this idea that early on, you always do what you think to take care of, not only yourself, but that don't let others define you. So I always say to, whether it's young women, but actually young men, anyone, one of the reasons I'm such a strong proponent of STEM, of technology and science, riddled through every job that's out there. It will be the birth of new vocational schools, right? I think it'll rebirth that in America. But I say go to school and take math. Take math, take science, take some. And I said, I practiced as an engineer for just a very short time. I worked for General Motors first. And so I really, when I went into engineering, but I said what I thought it did was teach me how to solve problems. Now they get bigger with time, by the way. So, but whatever, no matter what you choose to do, I think it's a great foundation. And so that to me is what kind of led me down this path of, A, don't let someone define you. B, go right ahead and, take something that'll give you that foundation that would endure for anywhere you chose to go in your life. And, because I spent much of my time, not just in engineering, but in sales and in services and building out our services business and just a wide range of things. And that would be my recommendation.
As a liberal arts major, I might get into a debate with you about STEM versus liberal arts. But in all seriousness, in your role, and you said it, you only practice engineering for a short period of time, and then there are new skills that you have to develop, and certainly when you get to the top of the organization, my degree in psychology might be a little bit of a help in a situation like that.
No. People always say, they say, what do you look for when you hire people, right? And I always say, and I think this is never more true than right now, the most wonderful characteristic is someone who is endlessly curious. Because I saw a book the other day, or one of the great characteristics is now for everyone, lifelong learning. And I think for all of us, it's why you're here. Why else would people be here for 3-4 days, right? Other than being endlessly curious. I think that's what you need in this day and age, because the reinvention is happening so fast. So that's why I've often said when people say, well, did you have a mentor? I often recommend to people, you don't want one. I think every time you're with someone, you look at them on, well, what can I learn? What can I learn from Steve, right? So look, Steve has been CEO of this organization for 17 years. Do you realize how many people are not CEOs for 17 years? There's like one, it's Steve. So you should, so it's true. And it is, so every encounter, so I want to ask you a question.
All
so
right.
your 17 years, which this is your, Steve and I came out front to watch the introduction. We both wanted to see it. And I said, cherish these moments, because this will be, you're sitting here in that role the last time to watch at this conference, that motion. And so what have you learned over all of that time that you would pass on?
What I've learned most, and you touched on it a moment ago, is the need to be flexible. One of the things I've talked to the HIMSS staff about, and I think if you ask any of them, what's the one thing that Steve talks about most? It's change and flexibility. It's what defines us. And it's really been what has allowed HIMSS to grow from where it was 17 years ago to where we are today, is that willingness to be flexible, that willingness to embrace change, that willingness to take calculated risks. Never bet the farm, but put some things out there, and some of them don't work, some of them do. But I think that's the thing I would say to anyone in any setting, is that you've got to be able to deal with whatever gets thrown at you and be flexible and also have a solution for that. And we do. We have a mantra, don't take a problem, take a solution to anything that comes up. And as a result, I think we've achieved really a nice interpersonal kind of culture at HIMSS where, as I said to staff that I was meeting with on Saturday, anyone in the organization should feel very comfortable in calling somebody else out, including me. If the line is BS, then call me on it and say so. And creating that environment that allows for that degree of exchange and interaction, I think very much still comes back to that thought around be flexible, be humble, recognize where you've been and understand those sorts of things. So I think those are the things, and it has. Some of the crowd may not be aware that I have announced my intention to retire at the end of this calendar year.
They don't all know that?
It's out there.
To make your announcement.
No. It is public and all, and it you know, this is truly a great opportunity for me to thank all of you for what you've done in contributing to my 17 years.
Well, you got your fan club.
Thank you.
There you go.
Thank you. So we had a little conversation about what's next, and so let's close with that. What's next for IBM, and what's next for Ginni?
Given
that you now have been
I'm not going anywhere.
CEO for 5, well, I think you said you've been a CEO for 5 years, so
that's
you
fine.
may be on
I'm
borrowed
a
time
baby.
here. So.
I'm a baby. No. There is, I think, look, what I think is next, as I said, this is the beginning of an era. I cannot think, for all of us, I can't think of a more exciting time to be here. I really can't. And I have been here through, you gave the dates up there, so it's been a few decades. And this is a time that I think the promise of what a world with all of this will be like is the ability to solve some of this world's greatest problems. Now, as I said, I'll end with one of my greatest learnings. I've repeated it many times. I say growth and comfort, it never coexists.
Yeah.
And so and it's true for a person, each of us, it's true for a country, it's true for a company. And so this isn't a straight line, but this is a moment. I think we are really lucky at this point in time because we will solve, whether it's education. I see the work that we're doing with education to personalize a learning for your child who can't learn, and every child should have the right to have the right way to be approached to learn and break through. You'll see it in education. You're going to see it in healthcare, and you are going to see us be able to break through in ways that we never have. Not all at once, but they will come. So what's next for me is in us, I hope us, because certainly Watson Health, we're doing financial services, we're doing cybersecurity, we're doing commerce and other things, but Watson Health is that moonshot, and moonshots are made to be landed.
Well, congratulations to you, and thank you so much for being with us.
My pleasure.
Right.
For Steve, his last interview.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. We've got a great week planned for you. Many things happening over the course of the next 4 days. So have a great week. We will be reconvening on various days with significant speakers from